Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear students of Honors Part 4, today, how you are doing? Today, I will first recite a few lines from the poem Acquainted with the Night, and later I will analyze the poem from different angles. And now, let me recite a few lines from the poem Acquainted with the Night. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the farthest city light. And let me now skip a few lines and read from here. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. And let me now recite the last two lines. Proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. And my dear students, let me now give an introduction to the poem Acquainted with the Night. Acquainted with the Night, a sonnet, is one of the best poems written by Robert Frost. And it is included in the volume entitled West Running Brook, and the volume was published in 1928. To first simplify the contents, one could say that the subject of the poem is the feeling of loneliness that enwraps one while walking late at night in a strange city. The poem could also be read at a symbolic level. It is an expression of the poet's sense of personal loneliness in a strange and unfamiliar world. The huge luminary clock that tells him that the time is neither right nor wrong could be taken to be a symbol of the relativism, which is the basic cause of the melancholy in this poem. The poem demonstrates that his predicament, his situation is thoroughly within his grasp. And let me now say the development of thought of the poem Acquainted with the Night. The lyric is intricately woven and has a close-knit structure. It is possible to interpret the poem on various levels. And if we read the poem at the simplest level, it is a record of the comings and goings, the sounds heard and the things seen in the dead silence of the night by a city worker, presumably the poet himself. In a very simple and a straightforward manner, the poet tells us that one night, wrapped in a mantle of darkness, he walked down the silent streets upon the farthest limits of the city. The rains had stripped the roads of all their life and vitality. They were lonely and desolate like the poet himself. The poet builds up a very lonely, sad and cheerless scene with a remarkable precision and a sense of immediacy. In some respects, Frost is as modern and as classical as Baudelaire, Dante and T.S. Eliot. The saddest city line immediately links up the protagonist of this poem with Eliot's proof rock, a symbol of all the minus points of modern society. And my dear students, you get the character Prufrock in T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The scene is that of a dark, rainy night. The streets are lonely, and the only human figure visible was that of the watchman who was out on duty. The poet passes him with downcast eyes. He does not want to explain why he does this. We could speculate that perhaps he himself does not know. He perhaps wants to avoid the watchman because he would ask him the cause of being out at that late hour. The poet has not done anything wrong, but he knows that it is impossible for him to explain why he is out at that time. He is on the street because he is provoked by a sense of utter loneliness, isolation, and the feeling of meaninglessness. And these feelings are beyond communication, and these feelings cannot be communicated to other people. In this way, the poet is able to bring out the meanness, the pettiness, and compartmental separation between individuals. Constant misunderstanding is the only source of communication here. The poet's work is disturbed by a sudden shrill cry. A voice comes across the houses from another street. He listens to it in complete silence and tries to interpret it. It is not addressed to him. It is a vague cry, perhaps epitomizing the inner cry of every individual's soul, which is restless and unsatiated. The state of every sensitive individual dwelling in cities. The poet's personal melancholy acquires a universal significance and is symbolic of the ache of modernity, ache of modernity, ache of modernity. Like a great and universal artist, the poet moves from the personal to the impersonal. The poet then tells us that he observed a clock tower with its luminary clock, the tower almost touching the sky. When it struck the hour, to the poet, it seems that instead of telling what hour of the day it was, the clock was making a proclamation. The time was neither right nor wrong. With this expression, the poet brings us into a realm which is beyond nature, beyond good and beyond evil. The poet here seems to suggest that the universe is an impersonal, detached, and mechanical, though systematic, like a clock. It has no sense of right or wrong and is therefore never caught in moral dilemmas. It might be interpreted as the poet's inability to make a moral choice. Frost only investigates and explores. He lacks Eliot's conviction and decision. Wyvern Winters rightly terms him to be a spiritual drifter. And now let me shed some critical light on the poem. This is one of the poems that has been admired and loved alike by readers and critics. To Untermeer, it is a record of personal melancholy touched with terror. The repetition of the last line, I have been one acquainted with the night, is as effective and important as that of the last line of stopping by woods on a snowy evening. It is the epitome of the entire meaning of the poet's experience. It is an apt ending to the lyric. Loneliness is the most prominent, dominating, pervading, and lingering feeling in the poem. Brouwer, a keen critic of Frost, has very rightly pointed out that in some of the earlier poems of Frost, the same shadows of loneliness were looming large. I personally feel in this poem the intensity of the pangs of loneliness is much greater than in any of the earlier poems. It might be rightly said that in intensity of emotions and the capacity of conveying the sense of loneliness, this poem is an assimilation, a culmination, a summation of earlier poems. Brouwer feels that Acquainted with the Night catches the essence of earlier experiences of terror and loneliness, turning them into a perfect lyric of recognition and confession. In this poem, Frost has shown the sordidness and sense of isolation which haunt every individual, feelings that are natural byproduct of city life. This poem illustrates amply the all-pervading qualities of reticence and suggestiveness that are found in first poetry. Elizabeth Jennings articulates this point very these points where eloquently when she says, Elizabeth Jennings articulates this point eloquently when she says the most interesting thing about this poem is its supreme and calculated reticence, its insistence on an understatement, its refusal to say more than the poet thinks or feels. In this, it is typically Faustinian. And let me now conclude the discussion on this poem with what critic Nishi's observation about the poem seems to provide an apt conclusion to the poem. It is worth noting that Acquainted with the Night is one of first relatively rare poems that are worked out entirely in urban terms, remote from his preferred world of farm and countryside. It may be that not only the time but place as well is neither wrong nor right. And my dear students, I hope that you will understand this poem. This is a very simple and easy poem, and I hope that you have enjoyed your time with me. And with these few words, I would like to conclude my lecture for today. Thank you very much.